right, guys, welcome back to another Meet the Candidate. If you're watching this and you have questions for the candidate, just pop them right in the chat and we'll try to get them asked. I am your host, Jared Moore, and on tonight's program, we have Tim Goodvoice. He is a candidate for Principal Chief of the Mvskoke Creek Nation. Mr. Goodvoice, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right. So I guess to start off with, tell us a little bit about yourself, your experience. Why are you running for chief?
My experience is, I'm a 61-year-old Mvskoke Creek Nation citizen. Been all my life, ever since we were able to enroll. I have 10 grandchildren, 5 children, and I've been working for tribes for 24 years. I am a veteran, served in the military, and my degrees are in chemistry and biology from Northeastern State University, and I have an associate's degree in electrical electronics technology. I did a summer of research at Harvard Medical School in neurobiology, and that's what I bring to the table. I started working for tribes almost 24 years ago, and I was a single dad raising 2 little girls who are now college graduates. My older kids, they are successful working, and so it's been a really good experience. My original track was actually to go to med school. That didn't happen as a single dad, but I don't regret a minute of it. And so I found myself working for tribes and getting into the position as an executive director and as the tribal administrator, becoming familiar with all the grants and contracts, negotiations. I've sat on economic boards. I currently sit on the Mvskoke Loan Fund board, on which I am on hiatus currently during this campaign. What I'm looking to do as running for chief is I want to be able to bring together a divided nation. And I think from my meet and greets and other people that I've visited with in the communities, I find that that's the sentiment that we all share, is that we're so divided that we're being picked off by the federal government. We're being picked off by the state of Oklahoma. And I believe it's time that we come together and stand strong against those forces and take control of our nation, take control of our destiny, and have something to hand off to our youth.
When you say we are a divided nation, could you elaborate on that? What's the division there?
When you look at the divisions, there are many actually. From the sentiment that other people have used over the years saying we're south of I-40, north of I-40, there's a division as far as socioeconomic disparities. There's not a lot of investment into our communities that could use the investment, and we're divided in that way. And I believe that we need to have the opportunities to succeed, as we are all Mvskoke people.
I see. One of the things, in preparation for your interview, I was going through your Facebook, your campaign's Facebook page, and looking at some of the answers. And you touched on the topic about available housing for citizens and businesses on the reservation and how that needs to be expanded. Could you talk a little bit, like, if you are elected, what are some concrete things you will do to try to make that happen?
There are actual methods and opportunities that are currently out there. And one of those being housing actually for professionals. And I'll just start right there. Doctors, lawyers, nurses, anesthesiologists, those in those areas that are serving. We can actually do lease to own type properties where, people that come to serve our nation, that they can actually lease to own the house. If they choose to, they can purchase it and sell it. We can do that very readily. That's an opportunity that we can use. A lot of those are based upon CDFIs, which are the Community Development Financial Institutions, which we do have one. Ours is not quite as large as some of the others that operate banks. So that's in one way. We also need some type of temporary type housing, such as rental and leases, for some people that are transitory workers, or the USDA called them migratory workers. I don't really use that term, but many times they'll work in an area. You have visiting nurses, things like that. Others that might set up businesses that are temporary businesses, and we have to be able to adjust to the times. And what we see in the arena of people operating businesses is that they're moving from one location to the other, and we're no longer like we were 30, 40 years ago, of people operating in the same job for 30, 40 years until they retire. So I believe that there are ways that we can actually improve our housing opportunities.
Okay, and so along those lines, what are those methods that you would use?
Well, part of that is as I mentioned, is doing the lease to own,
Mm-hmm.
where we actually become the developer and sell the houses and build them and then lease to own them. We're putting people to work, uh, putting to work with our various trades. We don't necessarily have to go to outside bidders. We have people that are fully capable of doing construction work on those houses,
Mm-hmm.
framers, electricians, carpenters, plumbers. They're all in our nation, and we should employ them. If we're able to use those dollars, we're actually pouring back into that economy, and they're hiring, nephews, brothers, sisters. They're using others in our nation, so we're actually building that economy of our nation from the inside out. And so it's a long-term commitment. It's a long-term process. But I think once we go down that road, we're going to see how actually valuable it is. So,
So would these be mandates that you would hand down to housing, as to say we need to have this program developed, or this we need to hire more citizens, or?
it wouldn't actually necessarily be housing. We could do this under an economic development arm. We could do this with housing. I believe that we have to take a multifaceted approach. I think for a long time we're looking at processes that have been handed down that are now becoming archaic, and we have to really think outside of what our norms are to actually implement many of these things. So we look for the best opportunity to implement. Where I work now, we built 18 units of elder houses. Actually, it's for grandparents raising grandkids. And part of the process that we're using is to build a daycare right across the street, build a grocery store within 500 yards. And so we're building the community right where the community is at. And then once people come there, these people may want to work in our daycares. They may work in other places, but at least they'll have a daycare to go to. At least they'll have a place to shop with actually food products that are more nutritious and more beneficial and more healthy. We've actually are working on bringing in fiber optics so that children, when they go to school, they have the opportunity, as everyone else, to log on with good streaming capabilities. So, it's a holistic approach to how we develop. So in our communities, and I like to call it our community and economic development, because it all ties in together. It's not just about building a store. It's not just about building houses. It's about education. It's about our culture, history, language, and tying all those pieces together and becoming the community that we once were.
I see. Along those lines, you're still a tribal administrator with Tlapalaco Tribal Town, is that correct?
Yes, sir, I am.
And so if you are elected chief, is that a position that you're going to resign from that position, or how are you going to handle that particular situation?
I would have to leave the position to be the chief. Being the chief is a commitment that you can't hold an outside job or do anything else, because that's going to be a commitment at a level that I believe, if you've talked to former chiefs, people would understand what that commitment level is, and I would have to throw everything into it. So I understood what I was getting into when I entered into this campaign, and I don't take it lightly at all. As a grandfather, I love spending time with my grandkids, but I believe that we can really bring some positive change to our nation. And I've met a lot of people, and they're agreeing. We've had discussions, and I was hoping some of them might even come on and continue to ask us, other questions other than what we've, discussed.
Yeah, and I want to remind you guys too, if you're watching the stream, just go and pop your question into the chat and we'll ask them. Normally we get questions by now. I don't see any popping up yet, but so if you guys got questions, go ahead and put them in the chat and we will ask them. Let's see. I guess another question I had for you is, you previously ran in the last principal chief election, and you didn't make it past the primary stage. Is there like a strategy change for you, or like what are you going to do to try to pull in some of those votes from people who may want to vote for a different candidate or might want to vote for Chief Hill? Like, how are you going to sway them?
Well, 4 years ago, and this is what I've heard actually all through the reservation on my meet and greets and visiting with elders. You know, I am not, or have not been in the political arena, but I have been in tribal government for 24 years. And having worked there, I'm not a high profile person. I work. So
Mm-hmm.
when I entered the race, what I hear is that people liked what I had to say. They liked the vision that I was promoting. And they said, we just didn't know who you were. We don't know who you are. Well,
Right.
I grew up in Okmulgee. My mother and father, Sally Jones Goodvoice, my father Kenneth Goodvoice, my grandparents Walter and Mary Jones. She was Mary Yahola Jones. I am related to so many people around here, and I have a lot of family. But a lot of the people in the outlying areas did not know who I was. But
Mm.
what I'm discovering now is that people are finding out who I am. And when I ran 4 years ago, I invited them, come visit me at Thaplaco, see what we're doing, see how a vision unfolds and actually becomes a reality. One thing I will say is that I don't make promises, but I tell you what I can do, have done, and will do. So I believe that many times people enter in as a candidate and a politician that they're going to promise that they're going to do something. I'm saying, come look at my body of work over 24 years, and you're going to see where we've increased economic footprints from 30 million up to 240 million, in a short amount of time, in 7 years. That's what we're looking at. In another arena, we went from 7 employees and the treasurer actually writing checks out of a double entry ledger book. And we went from that to 150 employees in our zenith with an economic footprint that was massive, creating all those jobs. That represents 150 families. We improved the socioeconomic condition of everyone. We used our social services programs as litmus test as to our success for implementing our education programs, for actually increasing the amount of tuition dollars that were available to tribal members. So the same way that we have been working, or that I've been working through these years, is to build teamwork, to get buy-in, and I operate on a team basis. That I want every member of the team, no matter what your job is, you are important, you are vital to what we do. There's dignity and respect that goes into that, where people enjoy coming to work. And when they do that, we find that we are all successful.
All righty. We've had a question pop in. I'm just going to read it here. Blue is asking, what are your views concerning the Creek Freedmen?
That was the question that was asked 4 years ago. It was interesting because it was the very first question that came in 4 years ago. When you look at our Constitution, it says you need to be by Creek blood. Part of being the chief or any elected official is you support and defend the Constitution. It's not about race, it's about the Constitution. So until that time that the Constitution is changed by referendum vote, it says by Creek blood will we be enrolled.
Alrighty.
And that position is hasn't changed at all. And for people that would even ask that question, my great grandfather was a freedman, and so I know where his allotment was. But it does not change the fact that that's what our Constitution says. It's the right of the people to actually vote on that. And that happened in 2008 when we had the Constitutional Convention and it was voted down at that time. We had due process at that time.
Okay. You also, on your Facebook, I noticed that there was a discussion about workers' rights and things. And we normally get a question in the chat. We haven't this time, but we normally get a question in the chat about tribal workers, and if you would support their ability to unionize, or code that would support them to unionize. And so, what are your thoughts on that? And if you want to touch on job security for employees of the nation.
With as far as unionizing, that's an interesting topic. But we as community, we as who we are as Mvskoke people, did not need the protections of a union because we treated each other with dignity and respect. Some of the concerns that I've had expressed to me as I've been out visiting is that, are you going to come in and just fire everybody? Absolutely not. That's not in any way what I have on my agenda. When I first went to Thaplaco, that was the same thing that they thought. I show up day one, they thought I was just going to fire everybody and bring my people in. Everybody deserves an opportunity to succeed. And those that do not want to serve our people probably won't be there. But those that will still be working. And that's one of the things that I find is that people generally get on board because they want to do a good job. They want to show up at a place where they are happy to come to work or looking forward to because they're making a difference. What happens, though, is that there is so much disrespect, and I'm not just speaking to anything specific, and people are not treated correctly or fairly within the policies, or some people are actually treated differently under those policies and get away with things that others don't. That disparity or that inequality that happens right there makes people not want to work for us. But I believe that everybody should have the dignity and respect that they deserve when they do their job, so that when they come, they're going to give their best effort. You take care of them, and they're going to take care of the nation.
Okay, I did want to make a comment here to Sharon Britt in the chat. She just posted sexual harassment ? Could you form that into a little bit of a question there? Oh, she says, what are your thoughts regarding a health board? Sharon Britt asks, what are your thoughts regarding a health board?
I've had discussions with many in the communities. We had a health board at one time, and I'm not for sure why that health board was done away with and that we no longer have that. I believe that's an area that needs to be explored. One of the things that I really believe in is checks and balances. You have to have checks and balances. Everywhere I've been, we've been able to generate clean audits. We've been able to get clean program reviews. But when we get into the arena where you have a consolidation of authority and there's no checks and balances to it, it can go off track. And don't get me wrong, I'm not accusing or pointing fingers at anybody, but I believe that it needs to be explored and then see if that's the best way to go forward. Do we go back to the method of having a board? Do we leave it as is? But I think that decision is made internally with the input from the council, with the chief's office, and with the tribal citizens' input as to how to best serve. We have to do the metrics. There needs to be, if you would, an audit analysis of all of our programs, of how they are actually operating, the efficiency at which we are able to deliver services.
Okay. I've had another question pop up here. Darissa Golden asks, can you tell me anything about the 1866 Creek Treaty?
Well, it's there. And, I think a lot of it is that it established our reservation, but our Article 2, as it relates to freedmen, is different than some of the other tribes. And some of the other tribes actually expressly say they will accept the freedmen as citizens. Ours does not do that. And when you look at the Supreme Court actually recognizing that we still have a reservation, that opens up a whole plethora of questions on criminal. It opens up the question of, do we have enough law enforcement to service those areas? It opens up taxation. It opens up the question of, should we or should we not be paying tolls on toll roads that run through the reservation? The sale of tobacco products or other things that are out there that have always been in dispute. There are many things out there that we have to look at, but we can't take a back seat to anybody over that. And the 1866 treaty opened that up for us. So yes, it's a broad-ranging document, but I think that people really need to keep in mind that there have been attacks on those treaties. And when you look at it, you need to go look at Cherokee Nation versus Georgia. You need to look at Worcester versus Georgia, because we had a diminishment of tribal sovereignty with those court cases. And when you look in, I want to say, and this is just right off the top of my head, it's Wolf or Wolfson versus a municipality. There was, again, a diminishment of our tribal sovereignty across the board by the Supreme Court, because they claimed in Cherokee Nation versus Georgia that we were a dependent Indian nation. We were dependent sovereign nations. So we're dependent on the federal government. That was a reduction in sovereignty. When you look at the 1900 case, that right there said that we could only exercise within the reservation. Well, now we
Mm-hmm.
see that 1866 is a reservation here, so we can exercise that authority on that reservation. So what looked like a diminishment actually strengthened our position on that. But you follow those court cases, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I believe it's in the 1980s, 85, 86, somewhere around there, actually referenced the doctrine of discovery in a court case against tribes. There's no such thing as a doctrine of discovery. So we have to really look across the gamut of these court cases and how they relate to that treaty and how we go forward.
Okay. I wanted to shout out to Hurting My Past in the chat. I see your question there, but I can't make sense of it. Could you rephrase that a little bit? That the how do you non-Muskogee enrolled members of other tribes seek political representation? I don't understand what you're asking me there. Could you just refine that a little bit? And then I'm going to jump down here to the next question. Creek Pride 23 asks, tell us about your military service.
Military service. I joined in 1985. I joined the U.S. Army Reserve. I joined the 12th Special Forces Group. I was on my path inside that unit with a contract that would have taken me to get my tab in the Special Forces unit. I was pretty injured pretty badly on a field training exercise, and the military was going to remove me from service because of the injury that I had to my legs. But I was advised to actually transfer to another unit, which I did for 2 years. And I came back. I felt like I was rehabbed and strong, and I got back into the unit, went and completed airborne school. I completed my preventive medicine training and was on track to go ahead and get into the selection phase. I went to selection, got gated, which normally happens about 60% of the time. The main thing is that you don't quit. So I came back, was refitting and ready to go hit it again when we were deactivated. At the time we were deactivated, I had orders that were going to send me to Kenya, Ethiopia, and Sudan, and then rotate back and go in and do a training op over in Nepal. But orders were canceled. Our unit was totally deactivated, and we went away. Had nowhere to go, so I got out.
Okay.
And so that's the extent of my service. And if the question is, did I get my tab? No, but I did serve with my SF unit. And what if the old soldiers remember, we were on the TONE, which was the Table of Organization and Equipment. So that's where I did my time.
All right, great. I think that's very thorough. We've got probably, it looks like 7 minutes or so, 6 minutes or so left. So if you guys got questions, make sure you get them into the chat before we wrap, because we're only going to do about 30 minutes as usual. So here's a question for you, Mr. Good Voice. Let's say you get elected. What does your first month look like? Are you going to push for certain legislation? Are you going to, like, what's the priority for you right after you're sworn in?
Okay, let's say in the scenario that I went out right in the primary. That'll give me some months to prep, to look at the budgets, to do analysis on the programs, to do my evaluations. Then I would be ready to hit the ground running. If we go into a runoff and I should prevail in the runoff, that shortens the time. Either way, I need to do prep and evaluation, because I think knee-jerk movements are never good. I think everything needs to be analyzed as to what we need to do going forward that's going to have a long-lasting impact that will not be negative, or actually to mitigate the negative impact that it may be to others. So my first thing is to actually evaluate where we are. Did the same thing where we were at, where I'm working right now with Toplaco. Came in, did an evaluation. It took me a couple of months to actually evaluate all the programs, determined where we were at in our efficiencies and knew that we could actually improve. Came up with a training program and made some adjustments, not firing anybody, but actually moved people around to where they needed to be. And we improved our efficiencies up to 85%. And as you can see, we're currently working on $16 million in projects for a small tribe. We are in the tens of millions of dollars in projects for this small tribe. and it's a great benefit to the community. But no one person can do this without teamwork,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's going to be it. People have to buy into the idea that, hey, we're working as a team, and I'm going to look forward to going to work.
Okay. I'm going to ask one more question. I'm kind of just going to cherry pick it in here. Let's see. It is, what are your thoughts? Crystal Parker asks, what are your thoughts about creating tribal elementary and middle schools on the reservation, or have you considered this as a need?
Actually, we're moving in that direction, and I believe that we need to have our own K through 12 school. I believe that we need to have science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, the STEM programs that'll make us competitive. I believe that we need to have our culture and language taught in those schools.
Okay.
And that is something actually that we're trying to establish right now. We started out with our daycares, but as you move forward, you can get some of those designated as an LEA, with the Department of Education, things like that, and open yourself up for funding. But you also have to come with the accreditation. So we're going down that road right now. So whether at the Mvskoke Creek Nation or if I have to stay right where I'm at, which I'm more than happy to do. I don't need a job. I have a job. So,
Mm-hmm.
but either way, yes, that's important.
Okay. I just wanted to holler at Hurting My Past. If you're not a Creek citizen, you can't vote in Creek elections. So you're absolutely correct that you won't have a say in who's elected. So I think it goes without saying. Let's see here. With all the okay, Lisa Deer asks, with all the services the nation provides, will you plan to streamline the application process and turnaround time? And we got
Absolutely.
3 minutes.
Absolutely. I believe that there is a way to streamline this because of many of the complaints that I hear that people aren't answering the phone. Why that is, I don't know. But I believe that we can streamline this by also creating jobs at the same time.
Okay, great. All right. I think we're there. Is there anything that you would like to mention that is a major issue for your campaign that you can squeeze into about 2 minutes?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And this is so important. 4 years ago, less than 6,000 people determined the direction of our nation. I encourage people, get registered to vote. Update your registration and vote. I'm going to ask for your vote, but no matter who you're going to vote for, get in there and vote. Let your voice be heard. Don't be silent, because that vote is your voice. If you want to see the change, then come out and vote. We can complain and we can talk all day long, but if you don't vote, it's going to fall nowhere.
Yeah.
So come out and vote. I want to see a massive turnout. What do we have? 24,000 registered voters? I would love to see 24,000 people come to the polls.
Yeah, it would be great.
And express themselves.
I think that is a major issue, from my perspective too, is we need to get more people to vote. Where the chat is mad. They want more time for this interview. So I'm going to give you we're going to keep going. If you guys pop in the questions that you want, I'm going to go a little bit longer. I'm trying to be fair to all the candidates by giving them an equal amount of time. There's no law at the Creek Nation that says we have to provide equal time, but that's just fairness. If you guys are in the chat and you're mad, you want to ask another question, though, pop it in there. We'll talk about it, okay? But hurry up. Because everybody's got to go. I'm sure Mr. Good Voice also has stuff. And I would also say, too, don't let this video be the end of your discussion. Mr. Good Voice has a Facebook page for his campaign, and he's trying to answer citizens' questions on his Facebook campaign. So if you got more questions for him, or you want to give him ideas or anything like that, go to his Facebook page and check him out.
And invite me. I'll come visit you.
All right, there you go. I have a question I'd like to ask about the streamlining process. The people not answering the phone complaint is something that comes back again and again and again, and the nation will have trainings for phone etiquette and stuff, as I'm sure you know from being out here. It comes and it goes. But I also think it's from my perspective as somebody who also works inside the government, there's also just kind of like an attitude of, like we're only going to answer so much, like we're going to only do so much for the citizens. We're not going to be at the phone constantly, in some departments. And that is a situation where, like, well, how would you correct that? Like, how would you go to those employees that are like, they see people pursuing services as somebody looking for a handout? How would you handle that?
There's complaints like that in many tribes of people not picking up the phone. No matter what tribe you go to, you're calling some department and rings and no one answers. Someone says, well, they're in their office, but they're not answering their phone. We don't know how busy they are. Can't make that assessment. I don't really know. But what I can speak to is I was considering, how do you address the problem? Well, I can throw out a possible scenario. Let's say that we have a economically depressed community. We run our fiber to it, not our fiber. We find a way to get fiber to it, increase the communications, and we operate a Mvskoke Creek Nation call center. It doesn't have to be massive. They answer the call, are able to answer general questions about our programs, but also they can transfer those calls right to where they need to be. But by doing so, we're creating jobs in our poor communities. And if you have people that are going to a certain location to do jobs, you have other people that are going to want to feed them, and they're going to operate businesses surrounding that. This is how you build economy. You build the jobs in those areas where they need to be.
Okay.
And that's just a scenario. So,
let's see here. Blue asks, what are the difference in Article 2 of the treaty? I think he's referring back to the 1866 treaty that you mentioned. There's differences in Article 2.
I don't know if they are able to access that treaty, but when you look at Article 2 as it discusses the freedmen, the Article 2 gives them rights and privileges to enjoy as native citizens, including equal interest in the soil and national funds, and the laws of said nation shall be equally binding upon and give equal protection to all such persons and all others of whatsoever race or color that may be adopted as citizens or members of the tribe. That's the key. They may be adopted as citizens or members of the tribe. It doesn't say will. If you go over to the Cherokee Article 2, it says they will be taken as citizens.
Okay. Let's go on down here. Creek Pride 23 asks, is McGirt broken with law enforcement in your opinion? I don't understand that question, Creek Pride 23. Could you rephrase that a little bit? I'm going to go to the next one. Dodie Barnett asks, what is your plan to support the courts hearing and adjudicating cases? We are only closing about 10% of open cases each quarter.
You can see that there's a problem, and our courts have actually increased. And I believe that there's a trajectory right now with our courts to try and hear more cases, but it's something that we're going to have to ramp up because this is not going to go away. So we need to be able to process all the court cases that are coming in. I believe there's enough data now since McGirt has come out to extrapolate those numbers and to saying this is kind of what we're seeing in civil cases. This is what we're seeing in fines and traffic fines. This is what we're seeing in criminal cases. And, sometimes the federal government will actually TDY someone over just to be able to go through those. I think all those things are viable options.
Okay. It's me, Jasmine B. asks, how transparent will you be if elected? There have been many problems with this current administration that have been left unaddressed or have been swept under the rug.
I have no problem with transparency. Like I said, I've always invited people, come down and see what we're doing. Come visit. We'll show you what we're doing. We have clean audits, program reviews. I'm not afraid to show anybody anything that we're doing. As a matter of fact, we actually provide technical assistance to other tribes across the country. Toplaka, with 1,000 members, is providing technical assistance to other tribes around the country.
Okay. Let's see here. Hurting my past, we're not trying to be disrespectful. I just was wondering why you're asking if you're not Creek if you can vote, because you have to be a Creek citizen to vote, as we were talking about earlier. I don't think that's being disrespectful to point that out. I don't see It's not working with cooperation. Creek Pride 23 says it is not working with cooperation, progress, and prosecutions from the MCN. Not all counties are cross-deputized, more likely to cancel with the MCN. Is that a question? I guess the question here would be, what are your thoughts about post-McGirt cooperation with municipalities if you're elected chief?
I think we're going to need that cooperation. And I'll tell you why. You can look at it saying, well, these municipalities have no authority over me. You can take that stance. But one of the things that you have to remember is it puts us in no man's land, because policemen aren't able to protect everybody. They actually respond to incidences. So if you have a situation where you need help and immediately, without a cross-deputization, you could actually be in jeopardy or with your loved ones. So I believe that we have to explore all options. We have to engage in our communities, as this is where we're at today. Isolation actually does not promote what we want to do economically, socially, or even with our law enforcement. So I believe that it is important that they understand. But just like some of the agreements that you see out there, is that if they write you a ticket, it actually comes to tribal court and it's adjudicated there.
Okay. All right. Well, we're 6 minutes over, guys. I'm going to ask one more question and then we'll wrap up. Crystal Parker is asking, how do we bring citizens and professionals back to the nation? Our communities are flooded with poverty, oppression, and substance abuse, not the greatest schools, etc. Have you considered this?
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I'm getting ready to post something probably coming out in a couple of days regarding an issue like that. And what I'm looking at is that many of our professionals and those that work in, like, let's say, for instance, in the mental health field, and I'm not just speaking about Mvskoke Creek Nation, I'm talking about across the country, is that we don't pay our people, our workers, our counselors as much as the private sector. That's just a given. That's not based upon any kind of information that I've looked at or statistics. You just know that that's what it is. But we need to be able to retain our people and to pay them to help service and help others. I can tell you right now, just from an outside observation in 24 years, I can almost say that they're overworked. I can say that they're understaffed and probably not making near the money that someone else is. And if you get offered, $10,000, $20,000 to go somewhere else, you're going to take it.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to be competitive, if not monetarily, in other ways.
So it sounds like if you're elected, you would advocate for raising pay grades across all the nation's jobs.
And remember, it's about performance. It's job performance. That's what it is. Yes, if you're performing and you're and it's all about performance, yes, absolutely. I think you ought to be paid for what you're doing.
All right. Well, on that note, I think it's a good place to wrap up. I know the chat got a little heated in there, guys, but don't get too angry at me. I'm just one guy. And I want to thank Mr. Good Voice for coming on today. It was a very lively discussion. You answered a lot of questions and got your campaign out there. You guys, I want to give you an update. Next week is going to be crazy. On Monday, we have a live wire with the National Endowment for the Humanities grants. So if you're interested in getting one of those grants, it's going to be at 6 p.m., that live wire. You can come in and ask your questions. Principal Chief David Hill is going to be on 6 p.m. on 15th of the Tuesday. And then Robin Whitecloud is going to be on the 16th. Dodie Barnett's on the 17th. And Lahoma Schultz is on the 18th. And with that, I'll see you guys next time. Chihit Chath, Lees.